Hey, how's it growing, friends? Welcome to Office Hours, your source for free cannabis cultivation education. My name is Keisha, and I am your co-moderator today, if I can say that word. Mandy, how you doing?
Oh my gosh, I am so good. We're here for episode 59, the last show for March. Wow, you guys, what a month. But you know the drill. We're going live over on YouTube. So if you're logging on over there, make sure you send us your questions and I'll get those over to the team. Make sure you're following us on all the social medias. So that's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Social Club. But this is a big day for us. We actually have a very special guest grower on the show. So I'm going to throw it back over to Keisha for our introductions.
Fantastic, Mandy. All right, before I get to who's on the show, if you're live with us here and have a question, feel free to type it in the chat at any time. And if your question gets picked, we'll either have you unmute yourself or we can ask for you. Jason and Seth, how's it going over there? Yeah, good to see y'all. All right, who do we have on the show today?
Yeah, we're thankful and honored to have Ellie Coyne, the Chief Operating Officer at East Coast Cure.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Ellie's my girl. Yeah, Ellie is amazing. She is growing some amazing stuff with her partner, Dylan, out there at East Coast Cure. They're really holding down the grow scene out there in Maine. But yeah, we're super excited to have her on the show. A couple people are joining us, but yeah, Ellie, welcome. Oh, you're on mute.
First podcast, first technical issue. Awesome. Glad to accomplish that one and notch that off my bucket list. But yeah, super happy to be here with y'all. We've been rocking with AROYA for a bit and happy to answer any of y'all's questions, tell y'all my story. Love chatting up with the crew. Thank you guys for being here also.
Yeah, well, we're here for all of your story. I've actually been able to dip a little bit into it because I was on the East Coast Cure case study tour and I got to interview you already. But yeah, if without further ado, do you guys want to jump right into asking Ellie a couple questions about her experience? Cool. I didn't mean to cut you guys off if you guys wanted to say something, but I'm super excited to have you on the show, Ellie. Yeah, so at East Coast Cure, you guys grow a lot. You guys are like kind of pioneers in the industry with your tissue culture lab. But I want to go back to your backstory. How did you really get started?
Oh man, that's a long story. But I'm originally from North Carolina. That's still, a very illegal state to operate in, consume in, and all that fun stuff. But I grew up in an advertising agency with my father and my grandfather. So being on the artistic journey was kind of always my trajectory, but never really felt quite, 100% fulfilling until I flew up to Maine about 10 years ago. And, I'd always consumed cannabis. It's always been definitely something that stuck with me for a very long time, since middle school even. And having to kind of live in the shadows and dodge the, legality in a lot of different ways. My first real exposure to growing and what cannabis really brings to the world was visiting a real bona fide grow up in northern Maine. I was kind of like a kid in a candy shop. I saw an old airplane hangar that was revamped into a cannabis grow. And I'm seeing teams buzz around. And that was my first kind of inclination, was wow, this is a real thriving industry up here. And I was, sheltered from this for a majority of my adulthood. And then coming up here and just seeing what's possible really blew my mind. And I think after I saw that first cultivation facility, it stuck with me. And I'm the type of person, once I have my mind set to something, this is what I'm going to do. And it clicked, it resonated, it merged my creative side with my analytical side and just wow, I need to know everything about how to grow this plant. I love the final product at such a young age. And I need to know now, how is this grown? And seeing that it was a thriving business up here in Maine in particular really sparked my interest. And I honestly couldn't get enough.
I feel like we all have that story about going into our first grow and just having that moment. So I was right there with you reliving that. Amazing. So when did you link up with Dylan? How did that start?
Yeah. So, being from such a precarious, beginnings where most of it was lived, in the shadows, you don't talk much about what you're doing. Then finally getting to the point, we're living in a legal state, doing real bona fide, cultivation type stuff. I was finally able to get on social media, connect on Instagram, on forums. Back in the day, forums were gold. So much golden knowledge back there. And then nowadays, Instagram is kind of where most our information thrives, But that's where I met Dylan, I feel like about 7 or 8 years ago. So it was a while ago. And we connected in a comment section and we started following each other. And then we started following each other's journeys. And, he had a really fabulous humble size grow up here in Maine. He followed me all the way from closet grows, basement grows, God knows what else grows. But he followed me all the way up until I was actually working a legitimate facility, about 40,000 square foot canopy grow. And, he was working to expand. I was working with a company that was expanding and I wasn't fully, thriving there. And he really wanted someone with experience up here to help him develop his company a little bit further and get to the level that, we're at now. So we, like I said, Instagram, we connected through social media.
Social media is so powerful for this industry. Isn't it amazing? Just the connections that come from that. Ellie, let's talk about your facility. What are you dealing with out there in Maine? And maybe we could bring in Seth and Jason and talk about those specifics, your day to day as a COO.
Yeah. So our facility here, it's a really modest, we got a humble facility up here. We got about 100 grow lights going. Definitely seen bigger. I've worked bigger, but I left those operations to get back to doing smaller scale stuff to really produce quality. Because at the end of the day, that's why I got into this field, is to solely produce quality medicine for people, including myself. And I saw that here with Dylan and East Coast Cure, he was on the precipice already at such a young age of introducing, technologies such as AROYA and, switching up nutrients and crop steering, technology that people and strategies, irrigation strategies that people were actively doing where I was operating at. And it was very refreshing. And, coming up here, seeing what, this modest facility is putting out, that definitely stuck. But, we're currently operating with about 100 lights, nothing too crazy, but we have big hopes for the future and scaling at a reasonable rate that we're comfortable with the amount of people that we have on staff, on hand, not getting too big too quick. But, we have our 2 flower rooms, a bedroom, mom room, and then we also operate a tissue culture facility as well.
Since you're running tissue culture, I would love to talk about genetics for a second. What kind of heat you bringing out there in Maine? What's going on?
Oh man, we're self-proclaimed genetic junkies. I mean, we can't collect enough genetics. And so we developed our tissue culture out of necessity for ourselves. We have about 250 proprietary genetics that we've sourced from, all across the world. And we want to protect those. And the best way for us to do that is putting them into tissue culture. So we teamed up with a partner out west. Dylan's also very well versed on tissue culture. And we started banking genetics. And then when we started banking our own genetics, we got a lot of interest in other people wanting to bank genetics. And then cleaning of genetics, hop latent thyroid is running rampant through the cannabis, community. So this is definitely a way to circumvent that, and also a solution to getting down to the molecular form of cannabis to produce verified clean genetics, which is very important to us. Mandy, you've been to our facility. You see, we dress out. Anybody that comes in, we're in hairnets, boots, everything. We're
It's like
clean.
the most high-tech clean facility I think that I've stepped into. So
yeah. So we put a lot of our emphasis on keeping clean, very sterile environments that keep our genetics safe. But breeding wise, we've been breeding for about 4 or 5 years, and keeping that under wraps until this year we're finally ready and able to start releasing some of those genetics.
that's so exciting. Oh my gosh. So can you give us kind of an idea of the kind of genetics that you guys have in your catalog? Or
Yeah, of course. So we have a pretty particular pheno of blue cookies, which is a particular phenotype of Girl Scout cookies, which was found from bag seed about 11 years ago out in Cali by our good buddy Turkey Bag. And we've been holding on to that for a while. It's a very specific terpene profile. It grows a certain way. You can't Google this blue cookies yet. It's a very specific, gassy, earthy. It shines silver when you put a light to it with like deep blue undertones. And we're really, that's our staple. We love this cut. We might be a little selfish in only breeding this cut just because it is such a potent, body-hitting, medicinal cross that just resonates with so many different type of patients that we see. And, we cross that with our entire genetic library. So we are just sitting on mountains of seeds of these. So we've been pheno hunting for the past few years, just trying to find those winners, just trying to put some new, good, really medicinal forward genetics out there for our consumers.
oh my gosh, that sounded amazing the way you described that.
Yeah.
It is, because I use it. I love it.
That sounds amazing. So you're dealing with tissue culture. You're dealing with an environment that's very, very much all about craft cannabis. So consistency and that quality is key. Like, talk to us about how AROYA helps you. What some of the benefits you're getting out of the platform.
Oh, Lord. AROYA has helped us tremendously throughout our expansion as a company. We're expanding. We have multiple retail shops that we're currently, building out. So you want to take a step away, and, I'm a self-admitted kind of control freak. So I want to know what's happening in my garden. I 100% trust my grower, but I still need to know. So keeping 360 eyes on what's happening in our garden is always top priority. But yeah, consistency up here. Being in the main market, we have a very heavy concentrated area of phenomenal growers. And you can't afford to flop on one round. You flop on one round, that could be detrimental to your brand, to your business. So using AROYA to keep that consistent, to know what strains we need to keep dialed in, is extremely important to us as a company.
Again, we're all about that. Seth, Jason, I feel like we're just going to take over the interview.
I was answering or asking all the good questions. So
no, okay. Well, I'm going to pass it to you guys. Come on.
Ellie, maybe you'll talk to us a little bit about what are some of the metrics during cultivation that you're looking at to highlight the best strains?
Yeah, of course. Metrics, are extremely important, especially when you're running a, big facility. And I found that most other grows that I was at, it was always pick the block up and see if it feels heavy, see if it feels, put your finger in it. Never anything real black or white. There was never really any sort of straight data that could help influence how we grow a certain cultivar. Having the ability to really zero that in, super important to what we're doing. Super important. Building recipes per cultivar, very important. I would say that majority of the time, our growers are just crunching data. We're facilitators. I always say the plant grows itself. We literally are just the facilitators. And having that 360 global view of what is happening in your media is so important. And most of us people coming from cultivation, we learned our stuff from Farmer John, Uncle Tony, whoever the heck. And having real numbers to quantify and have historical data on what we're trying to accomplish just makes our view 360 instead of 50%, 50%. You can put your eyes on a plant and say, sure, that looks good, but what the heck is happening in the media? And I remember a few years ago when I first got introduced to AROYA by Ramsey and Dylan here at East Coast Cure. I remember the first time hearing all these stats, and I'm just like mind boggled. Wow, this is like turning it in a completely different chapter. You're in a different book now. Now you're able to actually dial in crop steer and get the desired results. The numbers are there. It's up to you.
So two-part question in relation to what you're talking about right now. And that is, how long do you usually get to run a strain for as far as how many different runs? In previous episodes, we talk about, hey, our ability to get the best of this product is pretty short-lived based on market demand. So first question, definitely. How many runs do you usually get to run out of a good solid strain that you get? And do you develop a benchmark run that you compare all the harvests after that against?
Oh, absolutely. Every single run that we do, I'm really hard on our stuff too. Like if it's not hitting numbers, we got to do a retake on that. We got to see what's going on. But I'd say that us personally, we're running these cultivars at least 3 times. We're running them at least 3 times so we can at least gather some historical data on what's possible with this strain. And again, these are just numbers. So a big part of it also comes from terpene profiles, bag appeal, all the aesthetic type stuff, which, we're finding is also we can obtain through steering as well. So you can steer for yield, you can steer for quality, you can steer for a lot of different ways. And we're to the point now, it's like, yeah, yields are great, but if you're not dialing that in and steering to a specific quality, you're going to be done. You might as well, pack up and leave the conversation, especially in our market specifically and our brand specifically. I only want stuff that I know I'm going to roll up and I'm going to smoke myself.
Gotcha. I guess I've got one. How much easier are you finding it to replicate those runs and also, take that time? I know previously in my experience, we'd pheno hunt, you'd introduce it to maybe part of a zone, you get a certain expression, right? And then you go, okay, we're going to blow this up to the whole zone. Now we can actually play with it. And just like you said with steering, now we suddenly might have a little bit different phenotype profile, or not phenotype, terpene profile. We might have a little bit different bud structure formation. So how helpful are you finding data, even when you can't necessarily totally control a plant in an irrigation zone, like you've got a mixed zone? Are you finding that data very helpful in, advancing your strategies in how to deal with this particular cultivar and shortening up that time? Because to me, it used to seem like like you said, 3 runs. That was a bare minimum just to get it up to like initial selection. Are we sure? Pre-production type run, what can we actually expect? Yeah. And I've noticed with this data, after I run, several different strains through similar conditions, I can at least sometimes look at how they behaved and go, okay, I'm going to more closely match this strain with these other ones for a production run. Or, hey, I got this certain morphological expression. We had stretched out buds. It turned out weird. Yeah. Let's look at the data. Maybe we can explain that. Maybe we just missed, some of our cues on when to switch our steering strategies, or, something super simple like, hey, our EC dropped out part of the way through the run. We're not just going to throw this strain out because we messed up. Now we have the eyes to see where, those very impactful changes were made. And I don't know, I find in pheno hunting so often, I've been involved with throwing away something that was probably pretty awesome. We just didn't have enough data to actually make a good choice. Yeah.
Winner,
you always argue about it too, right? You have like, you have your couple ounces of samples. Yeah. A month later, everyone's like, we should have kept number 6, but we threw away number 2.
Like, not the number 2.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for me, at least, trying to do pheno hunts and stuff is so much easier, especially when you're trying to scale things, right? Because that's another variable part of that. Like sometimes you'll run into a semi-dwarf plant or something that just doesn't give you the size or structure you're looking for, but quality's there. Okay. Yep. That first round, we might pick that and throw away 15 others that were like, could have been real close and had 90% of what this one had, but actually been nice for us to grow,
Yeah, that's always the hard part, is throwing out the unwanted ones, or the unwanted ones. Yep. Yeah. Unwanted ones. Yeah, you never really know until, you can see some stats on them. Then a lot of it is the visual, you got to put your eyes on them and see what the heck is going on. And someone might run good stats, but not be what you're looking for. Absolutely.
I think Jason and I see that all the time. There are plenty of situations where you can look at a graph and go, can you show me a picture? It looks like it should be good, but you're talking to me. So there might be a problem there. And then it's like, okay, now we got to dive deep. It isn't your irrigation. It's something else we're looking for, whether it's VPD, FEDC, or, having a particular deficiency in one strain. I've definitely seen a lot of growers deal with that, where they'll butt their heads against the wall, just like, man, I cannot figure out this strain. It's like, hey, with data, you can at least eliminate a bunch of these possible variables.
100%. You eliminate a lot of that human error, by seeing exactly what the heck is going on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like other than that, someone's going to have to make the call, like personally, which plants aren't going to make it through. So that's tough emotionally too. So Ellie, let's talk about your brand for a little bit. Like how are you guys doing out there at East Coast Cure? Like what kind of products are you guys putting out?
Yeah. So here at East Coast Cure, we're definitely a flower forward company. We have currently one medical shop active. We have one medical pending, one adult use pending, a lot of other fun projects that, are pending. But yeah, so brand wise, quality forward. That is the constant thing that we're chasing. And we're constantly tweaking things in our garden as well based on consumer feedback. So say the bud is not as dense as people like, we're constantly looking at ways to improve what we're doing. And, with making changes does come some, ebbs and flows, but, keeping on our brand, just keeping quality driven forward. We're not required here to test for really anything on our medical program, but, us as a brand, we 100%, we test any product that we put out to market, just for an ease of mind. And, it's definitely an extra expense, but just keeping a nice, clean, quality product that people can consume is our main objective. We have some very loyal, long time. We've had our medical store up here running for about 4 years now, and we're constantly taking feedback on cultivars that people are wanting to see. But I find just keeping consistent quality is definitely what keeps people happy.
Ellie, so what are the patients out there really feeling in terms of quality? Like what's popular? What resonates with folks?
Lost you for a second. Sorry.
No, all good. Yeah, I was just curious to know, like, when you talk about quality, what is quality to the customers and the patients out there? Like, what is it that they like? What are they into?
Man, so quality, it's a very personal, perception of what quality is. I think in our criteria, quality is clean. You're not getting pesticide-ridden product. And then our patients, I just see they just want consistency. If you're just keeping that quality on the shelves, and quality in terms up here, we have a very well-educated clientele that shop with us. So if something is slipping, say it's not burning completely white, like my patients know people reach out to me personally, so we stay on top of all of that. I would say quality is kind of driven up here by terpene profile. We have a very, like I said, educated clientele up here where they want the stuff that is going to smell and taste and hit effect wise. Or they're not going to come back and they're not going to shop with you. And that is, terpene profiles are huge. Terps are life. And we are constantly striving for ways to improve our terpene levels. Cure is another big factor when it comes to quality. You don't want to crunch your weed up. You don't want to have it sizzle down to nothing. Only using top nugs in pre-rolls, all that sort of stuff. We don't do any like in-house processing, BHO or anything. We really try to strive on solventless techniques, all that sort of stuff to keep like a clean, top tier type product.
I was wondering what the top strain is on your menu right now.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say blue cookies.
I need to try that blue cookies. I'm gonna have to plan a cross-country trip for that one.
Yeah. That's just, in my opinion, like our flagship medicinal strain that we've crossed with our entire genetic library, like I mentioned. But out now currently, we have a strain called Blackberry Panna Cotta, which is blue cookie crossed with ice cream cake. And it is phenomenal. It's that heavy hitting indica. It's that body effect feeling, like you're going to feel the medicinal effects from this one. We also we have blue truffle, white truffle crossed with blue cookies, another fan favorite. Like I said, I could go on and on about what genetics we got going, but that one, we recently developed a strain called Blue Milk, which is blue cookies crossed with cereal milk. So it's a play on, a certain Star Wars movie with, blue milk, cereal milk, another great strain. So we've crossed stuff with a lot of other genetics that people are already familiar with, and then just added that like heavy hitting blue cookies pheno to it. Just beautiful stuff.
It sounds delicious. Okay, in a few minutes, we're going to start answering in some visitor and attendee questions here. But I was just curious, so you described some amazing genetics on your menu. You have an informed client patient base that will let you know if things are not consistent. Talk to us about the process of dialing all that in. What were some of your, would you say, biggest challenges as you were trying to crop steer towards these particular outcomes?
Regarding patient?
Regarding getting that consistency that the patients are looking for, those terpene profiles that they want. What does it take to get there?
I think we've built a repertoire with our patient clientele, because our flagship shop here, we only sell what we grow and products that we produce. I think we have successfully dialed in where people just come and expect our product to always be great. And we're lucky to have a shop that only sells their own product. And, I'm always open to feedback from all my clientele, but I feel like we've gotten ourselves here in 4 years where people know they're going to show up and they're always going to have a consistently great product. And we've been able to steer that, with the help of AROYA, keeping those strains consistent. We have a couple strains that we keep on our rotation constantly, one being the blue cookies. We have a couple other more sativa leaning strains. But I think after the past 3-4, I think we've been using AROYA for about 4 years now, 3.5, 4 years. I feel like we've gotten that dialed in now where that consistency is no longer questioned, and we just have a steady stream of patients that just know what to expect.
It's what every cannabis brand wants. You guys are doing it. You guys put in the work, and now it's paying off. Oh my gosh. So yeah, go ahead.
I was going to have a question. I mean, a lot of times we get a lot of growers on this conversation. I just wanted to ask a little bit about what's your daily life look like? Do you have a lineup of tasks that you go through every day, or is it a new adventure on what you have to tackle that day?
My current day-to-day is a little bit more padded. We're currently in the midst of 3 different state applications. So right now, whereas a year ago, I was definitely more heavily in the cultivation side. Today, I'm in the midst of 3 different applications that are pending, 2 different store build outs, 1 different equipment distribution company, mainstream distributors. So we sell services like, AROYA and nutrient lines, lighting, all that sort of stuff. But so now today, my day-to-day is a little bit more crazy. I'm needed everywhere. I'm needed here. I'm currently at our grow facility. So I try to pop in here. I try to pop in at least at our retail once a day. And then we're about to online our mainstream distributors as well this spring. Or later spring, I guess. But so right now I'm holding a lot of different directions, but the one constant honestly is being able to check my phone, know cultivation is good, or know what those alerts are, know what the highs and lows are, what's going on there. That's honestly, cultivation is the one side, and that's my background is cultivation. Just knowing I can be in all these different spaces and I can quickly do and see what's going on in my grow room has allowed me to be crazy in all these different areas. But yeah, right now, pulled in a lot of different directions, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
Ellie, you are really holding it down. We're going to move on to live questions just one more minute, but I wanted to ask you, like, we don't get a lot of, I haven't met, I think you're the first, one of the first female COOs of a cultivation that I've met. And just, we're closing out Women's History Month. And, just what's that journey like for you, kind of being in an industry where there's not a lot of women?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly can't recall working in another position where there were fellow females until the past year or two. Kind of working in the shadows, it was always very male dominant. But, for myself, just I ask a lot of questions and I make myself known and get myself in there. And I want to be a force to be reckoned with. Let's figure it out. Let's perpetuate your own desires forward. Nobody's going to sit back and give you a handout. Just work your ass off, position yourself into areas where you'll thrive. Most importantly, finding where your strong suits are and attack it. That's all I can say is, I was in a big warehouse down in Massachusetts, and I was only female. They were like, we don't even have a changing room for females. I was like, that's all good. But, fast forward 3 years later, put myself into an admin position, running a cultivation facility, and anything's possible. Put your mind to it, pursue it, and don't sit back and wait for anything to happen for you. That's my main thing. And I'm a question asker. If I don't know something, I'm not going to sit back and wait for someone to finally answer my question. I want to ask you, I'm going to pursue it. Don't be scared. Just go for it.
I love it. Wired up over here. Nice work, Ellie. Okay. Y'all ready for some live questions? And Ellie, we love to hear when our growers are on. If you have any feedback, please do chime in. But I think, Mandy, we've got somebody over on YouTube with a question. Yeah?
Yeah, it's popping over on YouTube. Ellie, thank you so much for that. Be sure to give us your expertise on these if you have that too. This question's about foxtailing. Taylor wants to know, I recently had some foxtailing on day 35 to 40 of flower due to a pH problem that has since been corrected. Do you have any recommendations on fixing foxtails at this stage to help tighten the flower structure? We're currently on day 41 of flower.
I mean,
okay. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Ellie. I want to hear what you have to say. Jason and I get to talk way too much.
So my first thing when it comes to diagnosing anything in a flower is going back and seeing what the environmentals are, seeing what your drybacks are, seeing what your nutrient uptake is. If your plant is already going to be compromised, it's not uncommon that you would see foxtailing. If your VPD is off, you're already not supplying your plant with the adequate grow conditions. For the most part, foxtailing can be a very genetically driven attribute to a cultivar. So it's hard to say based off that question what exactly the issue would be, but I would definitely want to I want to meet this person and be like, what else is actually going on? So there's a plethora of attributes or problems that could be happening in your grow. Step one is always monitoring your environmentals. What is your light intensity? What is I don't know what lights they're growing in, DLI, PAR, what is their EC? What's their runoff? Those are all sort of things that I would pre-check before trying to diagnose what a plant issue is. If you're not providing the correct environment, your plant isn't going to produce adequately. but I think foxtailing is usually a light intensity or light type issue. It could be a feed type issue, or it could just be genetically predisposed to foxtailing. But I like to hear what the experts have to say as well.
I think you covered most of the bases there, Ellie. The first question I ask people is, what's the surface temp on those buds? Usually every time. And where is it at? If it's on your, your apical nug and it's way up 2 feet above the rest of the canopy and it's 94 degrees on the surface of it, there we figured it out. But I think what you touched on is really important. We got to look at the environmentals and we have to look back in time. We have to look at every component that went into producing this crop up until this point, and then also accept that, all right, if we've got foxtailing, we've got genetic factors involved. Obviously, some plants are going to respond with that much easier than others to stress. If you're pheno hunting and it happens, some of them might just do that. Genetically, that's an undesirable trait that typically we have selected away from. And then the next thing to look at is, what is that overall bud structure like? If we've got foxtailing accompanied by also, that classic loose larvae bud, there's probably not a lot you're going to get that run to do to tighten back up, because at that point we've actually increased the stem distance between each of the flowers by stretching those individual flowers like the bracts, by stretching those stem cells out, and those are never going to shrink back down. The best you can do is try to correct, I think, any environmental situation you got going on and ride this round out without making it any worse. And then, you probably along the way really learned how to grow bud that's going to be great for washing for hash and making rosin out of or something. Right. But, like you said, we always got to go back and look, and then plants don't heal. So fix the problem and don't repeat it. I think that's the biggest lesson there.
Yeah, I'd be curious what the genetics are too. Mm-hmm. That's typically the biggest indicator on stuff like that.
Yeah, Taylor, if you have any more information, please do send it over. But go ahead, Jason.
It sounds fortunate enough like they might have caught it here pretty early in the cycle, day 35. And if they were able to correct it quickly, there is a chance that if they can get those buds to bulk up enough that it's not going to be quite as visible. They can cover over that foxtailing as long as they do some good ripening. Those pedestals will turn orange on them as well.
Yeah, that's amber. A good point, Jason. If you can get it to finish up and look okay, foxtails are pretty easy to trim off. It's not an ideal situation, but that's another one where sometimes the stuff that bothers us as growers doesn't always necessarily affect what the consumer thinks about it. Sometimes if you have a situation that you had to remedy and those slightly yellow leaf tips are really bothering you, that happened way back in, week 3 and it's day 43 now. Well, learn from it and move on. But, sometimes you've also got to have, enough value of your own mental health, I think, to know when to step back and say, okay, I need to not let this bother me right now. That's very important.
It's super important. Taylor actually came back with some context. RO broke and we forgot to switch from pH up to down for 5 days. Oops, seeing foxtails throughout canopy.
Yeah, that's not ideal. You really stress that plant out.
Not great.
Well, at least the rest of your environment probably is, relatively okay if that's the only thing that broke and leaf temps and everything else are in line.
It's those identifiable problems that actually are so much easier than when it just happens out of the blue.
So true.
Agreed.
Yeah. Thank you guys for your questions over there on YouTube. I will pass it over to Keisha to start with some of our Instagram questions we've gotten in this week.
Awesome. Thanks, Mandy. Just a reminder to everybody who's on with us live. We have 3 experts on today, so be sure to drop your questions wherever you are so we can get those answered for you. All right. Paul wrote in with a question. What if I'm seeing a higher EC in the substrate after runoff than before irrigation starts? Week 3, day 1. Running 6 P1s right now, really only hitting runoff on the last one. Some advice for Paul.
So 6 P1s runoff on the last one, that's probably just about right. Usually that's what we're classifying as P1s is irrigation's up until runoff. As far as EC in the substrate higher after runoff, it just depends how long after, so typically when, we're running irrigations at 3 to 4 EC, usually our substrate's going to be a little bit higher than that due to generative stacking, due to a little bit of salt accumulation in that substrate. Typically when we irrigate, that's going to drop a little bit down closer to our feed irrigation EC. It usually is going to rise after that, unless we're significantly underfeeding or we have really, really hungry plants. It's going to gradually rise after that last irrigation and some runoff.
Yeah, it typically should, as we're pulling water out of the block, unless that plant's uptaking so much salt that it's, really affecting that ratio as we dry back, it should go up. The other scenario that Jason was describing, I'll call it aggressively underfeeding, is something that actually a lot of people did do habitually for many, many years before, we kind of approached the idea that maybe cannabis can tolerate a higher root zone EC than what we had calculated was going on with other crops like tomatoes, strawberries, and stuff like that. So if I were to give someone that did not have a lot of commercial growing experience, especially over the last 5 years, but let's rewind the clock about 6 years. If I went to someone, especially I'll use the medical market, Ellie, because I know a lot of people in California that came out of that. They were buying liquid nutrients at the store, mixing at a fairly low EC feed, and actually pushing, especially using things like when cocoa came onto the scene. All right. A lot of people went, okay, I can throw a 30% perlite mix in here and really control my EC by pushing a lot of runoff every day. So we're just rinsing it either up to our 2.2 to 2.5 input or back down to that, pushing that excessive runoff. So, we really want to look at what was that value at actually. If you started at a value that's below your feed EC, then we're probably looking at underfeeding. If you start at an in-root zone value that is, at your wettest point below your feed EC. Eventually, with that generative stacking that Jason was talking about, our baseline EC at the wettest point of the day should still be a few points above even a 3.0 input EC.
Definitely.
Yeah, sounds about right to you too, Elia. What's been your experience?
Yep, 100%.
By the way, Ellie, how did you feel about that transition? Because I'm sure you went through that in your career, going from a more conservative approach with EC to like nowadays where, 10 years ago, we'd have been like, whoa.
Oh, Lord, if I told my old boss 5 years ago we were feeding at a 3.0, he would have turned around and been like, what? People are still shocked to see, high ECs, but I've always been a huge advocate, and proof is in the pudding. And so what, we get a 11 plus EC runoff, et cetera. I still get DMs all the time asking me about like, is this crazy to see a 10 plus EC in certain situations? And absolutely not. Obviously we have our parameters that we want to keep it within, but if you told an old head growing that this is, or most of them still use PPM versus EC is a whole nother thing, but telling them 3.0 ECC or EC is shocking and mind boggling. It was a few years ago, but I live in a world now where we're high feed.
One of the things that I just find so cool about using our sensor systems to achieve efficiency is now, rather than pushing lots of runoff to stabilize our EC, like Seth's talking about, or being worried about the economy of using lots more fertilizer at a higher EC, we can run that fine line and we can allow those salts to accumulate. We can feed it just the right EC to achieve where we want to be.
Exactly. That's why this technology, that's why this technology is it's invaluable. Saves you money in so many different aspects.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. I think YouTube is on and popping, right, Mandy? Going to send it over to you.
Yeah, it is. So we asked you guys a question over there. We put a poll out. What type of cultivars are you growing? So we listed some of the primary flavor classes of cannabis. So we listed sweets and dreams, OGs and gases, tropicals and floral, and Jacks and hazes. And OGs and gases had 67%, so they won, and tropicals and florals came in at second at 33%. So thank you guys for answering that. It's very interesting stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like tropicals and florals are really big in the Bay Area where I'm at, but maybe that's just what I'm buying.
So
Interesting.
everyone on the call, which one are you smoking?
I lean a little more towards the floral, but it just depends. What my comment is, I've noticed the longer a market has existed, and California is kind of a weird example because the medical market goes back so far, but the more educated the consumer base gets, I find a lot of them tend to move away from like the gassier, I mean, roll it back 10 years, you crack open an eighth bag and it gasses out the whole room. And you're like, whoa, this is good stuff, even though it smells like poop. Right. It's just strong. And now we've kind of come to the point where it's like, oh, okay, we've all tried that. And now there's this whole world of more exotic strains out there that people kind of find their way into once they have access to a dispensary that actually has, a pretty big breadth of selection. And anytime it first rolls out, those gassy strains are always at the forefront, right? It's just kind of like the purple thing is going on for a while. Now it's kind of dying down a little bit. But
yep.
I remember when Michigan first opened up, they were all about that. I think you're onto something there. I don't know what class this is in, but I'm hitting something called Uncle Snoop. If you guys know where that is from or what that's crossed with, I'm in Texas, so that's some context for that.
I'm hitting my home grow stupid fruits, and it's fruity. But I have to say, and I'm very drawn to like more fruit forward, stone fruit forward stuff. But when I get my hands on some gas, it's very exciting. I'm in for a good time.
Yeah. Right now, we just did a pheno hunt. I'm a sucker for orange terps. People either love it or hate it. We did a blue cookies, orange cookies, and we have a few different phenotypes where one is leaning like orange creamsicle, push pop, like creamy terps, and one is like fresh, like orange zest. Like I'm like right there, like give me all the orange terps. But on the East Coast with like in New York coming online, I'm seeing a lot of hazes, a lot of sours. I'm seeing a lot of that stuff being asked for now. People want that, like that old school, that funk.
The classics.
People want those sours back. I'm not saying that's what people are currently buying, but like that's the trend that I'm seeing by some real connoisseur types over here on the East Coast. People are wanting to bring back that old school, that New York sour diesel, all that sort of like that funk, that sour. So
all those nice, like, 10-week strains.
Yeah.
It's good to hear. I'm the Jackson Hazes in the group, so I don't even have to pass a joint.
All right. Well, come on over. We got you.
Oh my gosh, I love this discussion. Okay, well, that actually is perfectly along the lines of a question I was going to ask you. So this is for everyone in the room. Baby Gut Drybacks wants to know, what are two of the most different strains you've seen? So this is like whether they grow totally differently, whether they're chemically very different. I would like your take on this.
Is this to me or to everyone?
Or just just to anyone in the room.
We've just recently started growing out jet fuel gelato, and that's a heavy drinker. She's talking about irrigation strategies, right?
Well, yeah, like, so looking at plants, I'm really interested in seeing like different types of plants and how they're either chemically different or grow in totally different environments. Yeah, I'd like your take on that.
Oh, wow. Well, a lot of cultivars grow extremely different. Whereas like right now we're currently growing jet fuel gelato. We just produced that out of our tissue culture lab. And this is a new one for us to put into production round. And we're finding that she likes to drink. She likes to drink a lot. Whereas, some of our other cultivars are definitely, they're not as heavy drinkers as they require way less irrigation hits. But yeah, all cultivars are a little bit differently. And that's why it's really nice to have that data to see which each one wants to drink, what each one wants to do.
Is that that jet fuel a little bit shorter too, Ellie? not a terribly tall plant. Yeah.
It is growing a little bit shorter. Yeah.
So it's like kind of shocking sometimes. And you're like, oh, if I look across my room, some of these plants are 7 feet tall. This one's only 5 feet tall, but it's drinking more. Huh. That's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly what you just said. That's how she's been, and she's sucking it all up.
Well, I love that question. We are getting more questions over on YouTube, so I'm going to keep rolling with those. Taylor came back with another question. I keep my environmental sensors a few inches above my canopy. When the sensor falls below the canopy, my humidity goes up to 10 to 15% and temp drops about 5 degrees. If I'm concerned about pathogens or maintaining a healthy VPD measurements in this region, are these two questions? Oh, no. Sorry, let me start the second question again. If I'm concerned about pathogens or maintaining a healthy VPD, measurements in this region seem more relevant than what is happening right above the plant. Where should my sensors be?
So yeah, right at the canopy. And this kind of comes down to airflow and canopy management. These are the reasons, like, our recommendations are always try and keep that sensor within a foot of the top of the canopy. Using that reading to assume that's what your plants are feeling means that we have to have sufficient airflow and good canopy management in order to disrupt the localized environment, which is created by transpiration from the plants. So when our stomates are transpiring, they're cooling the leaves down, they're increasing the humidity around those leaves. So good airflow can help the uniformity across our room, and good canopy management can make sure that that is consistent over the run.
Yeah. When you're trying to map this out, I mean, honestly, shove that sensor down in there. Start down a foot, 2 feet into your canopy and start mapping out what your heat stratification looks like. And also, remember, anytime we're talking about this, just like Jason said, we're really looking at what's going on at the leaf surface of the plant. That microenvironment, that 1 millimeter around the leaf surface, is really the environment that the plant actually lives in. And us adjusting the rest of the room parameters is just trying to dial in that tiny microenvironment. So there's two things to look at. Number one is like, get a laser thermometer or a FLIR gun and see what your actual leaf surface temps are. Start dialing it in there, and then go, okay, if I'm talking about my AROYA climate station, yeah, I'm going to use that for precision mapping to try to figure out exactly what it is in the zone I want. If I have a HVAC sensor that's running controls in the room, I want to use something redundant like my AROYA sensor, map out the room and say, okay, what does this reading mean at the point where my HVAC sensor is? And is it practical to necessarily lower my controls sensor down into the canopy? Maybe not. I just need to know the differential so I can actually operate the room correctly.
Yeah, and a really good thing to do as well is make sure that you're mapping that difference across timeframes. So often we'll see that the room behavior is different when we've got lights on or lights off versus maybe we've got dehumes running later in the cycle. Maybe AC demand is changing. Those offsets can definitely change based on what's going on in the room, what time of day, how big the plants are.
Yeah, just what's the room look like? I know most of the rooms that we run into, Ellie, you can comment, you've been in a few grows. Usually about a year or two into it, that room's not exactly the same as when it was first built out, especially in terms of dehues, equipment's broken, been replaced, upgraded. So each of your rooms might have a little bit different differential that you have to work off that might hit at different points in the grow cycle, just because they're slightly different sized. One's got 2 Quest 600s and an Andon 220. The other has all Andon 310s, but it has 4 of them. We've got
so
all these
many
different configurations.
Go into regulating environmentals. 100%.
Yep. And every grow you go into is going to be at some stasis of improvement, right? You're never going to find one like I love seeing the new cookie cutter grows. They're great. But a year or two in, they're usually not so cookie cutter anymore.
Yeah, it might work.
Yeah.
Ideally, it should work, but no. Elevation, there's so many factors.
Yeah, and then just site specific differences, like water quality has been a huge one people are dealing with because, hey, we're pushed into these zones that are, generally like, an old industrial zone or generally away from procuring an easy, clean water supply, and oftentimes not far enough out of town to necessarily have your own water rights. So that's a tough situation to approach. And, at that facility, you might be pretty limited because you had to spend so much money on water treatment that, hey, we're chilling for a year or two on these other facility upgrades. We're doing the bare minimum because, well, if we don't put our money into the water, we don't have a product. So
if you guys are working in a retrofitted building, I feel like there's a couple of y'all. Keep tabs on that environment. It's changing. That is it for the questions over on YouTube. So Keisha, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thank you, Mandy. Thanks everybody over at YouTube. So Ellie, we're going to wrap up the show, but I just, we like to ask when we have growers on, like, it's been a rough couple of years for the industry. There's a lot of transition happening. So any advice you'd like to give to your fellow cultivators out there going forward?
Man, yeah, you're definitely right. It's been an ebb and flow in this industry. I mean, I'm here on the East Coast. Y'all are all more West Coast. But I think we all share that common ground that, the market tanks and thrives. And that honestly is just the nature of what most of us signed up for. Most of us are used to this, living in the shadows, doing this sort of stuff. And we're resilient people. I've never met so many people in one industry that are such hard, dedicated workers. And I'm super blessed to be a part of this industry. But stay on your craft. Never stop learning. The second that you shut yourself off to learning more about your craft that's when you're going to start failing. Work smarter, not harder. If there's an investment that you can make into a system, such as AROYA, or investing into yourself, you're going to see that pay off in the long run. Use tools that are here to help you, and stay vigilant. Stay on your craft. Stay with what's happening. I always like to make the correlation between chefs and growers. People get very stuck in their ways, and this is the one way to do it, but keep an open mind. Just stay a lifelong learner, and apply what you learn. Get rid of what doesn't serve you. We're all here for a common interest, in my opinion. And if you want it, you'll get there. And like I said, just keep pushing the boundaries of what you're capable of, because the tools are out there.
Ellie Coyne, COO, East Coast Cure out in Maine. Thank you for dropping those nuggets of wisdom. And thank you for being on our show today. It's so good to have you.
Love chatting with y'all today.
Yes.
First live podcast. Love AROYA. We're big supporters of y'all. And
this was amazing. We're going to have you and Dylan back. Like, let's have you guys both on the show next time.
Dylan's behind the camera right now, clowning.
He's in the room with you.
So
literally
never mind
to Maine.
I've never met him back here, but no, I'm just kidding.
Such a good show.
Yeah, no, awesome to have you, Ellie. Thank you so much, Jason and Seth. Thank you for hosting yet another awesome session. Mandy, I couldn't do this without you. Thank you for co-moderating with me. And shout out to our producer, Chris, for making the magic happen behind the scenes. Thanks, everybody who joined us today. Our office hours, we do this every Thursday. The best way to get answers from the experts is to join us live. To learn more about AROYA, feel free to book a demo with us. One of our experts will walk you through all the different ways it can be used to improve your cultivation production process. In the meantime, let us know if there's a topic you'd like to cover on a future session of office hours. You can post questions anytime via the AROYA app. Feel free to drop them in the chat. Send us an email at support.aroya@metergroup.com. Send us a DM. We are on all the socials. We record every session. We'll email everyone in attendance a link to the video from today's discussion. It'll also live on the AROYA YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and share while you're there. And if you find these conversations helpful, please spread the word. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye, y'all.